I've made all sorts of rivers in my time. I've never made a full snowy river though. I made a partial snowy river in my Four Seasons river. How many times can I say river in this introduction? But this is my first go at a proper snowy river. I hope you enjoy it. Right, so this started off as a shelf, which was a 3/4 inch piece of pine, and then I used some extruded polystyrene. This was cheap stuff that I got from Amazon. I usually like buying better quality stuff from the UK. I'm not sure if it's ever made in the UK, but anyway, I couldn't get any at this time, so I got this stuff cheaply. Just cut out a basic river shape out of the two pieces, and this would provide a decent depth as well. This is probably about 1.5 inches thick, and then it was a case of just carving the edges of the river, and for this I used a saw. I was also wearing a particle mask because I don't like the idea of breathing in particles of extruded foam, and then it was all stuck down with neat matte Mod Podge. I added a little bit too much. I think I've edited it out of the video because yes I did, but you can see it's all splattered all over the base there. I accidentally poured out too much. I'm quite a lazy maker really. I should have used a brush, but you know, just poured it straight out. Then it was a case of weighing it down and leaving it overnight. So I just weighed it down here with pots of texture and the remaining Mod Podge, and then it was a case of neatening up the sides of the diorama with some quick drying filler. I find this stuff works really well because it dries really quickly, but it also dries tough. It's the best stuff that I've used so far for this kind of thing. You can't apply it in too deep a fissure. It has to be, I think it's a maximum of about 5mm or something. Anyway, putting the end pieces on the end caps of the river, if you like. That was just using some balsa wood actually, which isn't very tough, but I'm not going to go knocking this around. Then sanding the sides flat and smooth, and then using the Hot Wire Foam Factory's hand routing tool here to cut some nice shapes into the rocks. Not looking to be too neat here. I'm no good with foam cutting things really, because I don't know, I suppose I lack the patience really. I'm sure you can get some really decent results, but for me it's more about just getting a basic shape in and then building it up later with a compound medium like sculptor mold or maybe some milliput or something like that. But this gives you a really good basic shape, which otherwise you'd be there for hours and hours with a knife and it would be incredibly messy. This is, you know, incredibly neat. While my sculpting job isn't incredibly neat, the actual mess produced is minimal. So there you can see I cut out a piece of I had a piece of pine. This would create a more solid side on the back edge there. I'd planned this to be some kind of a shelf. Actually I think this is the front edge, so this edge I'd planned to be a bit tougher, and that's because you know, if you knock into this then it'll be more protected. So I used a bit of pine and then blended it in. I've glued it on with you know, with wood glue or Mod Podge. Anyway, now onto the sculptor mold. And this I always mix thick to begin with, or thick or dry to begin with, and then add more moisture. Thing is, it can take absolutely hours to dry, days to dry. So depending on your climate, and it was fairly humid while I was doing this. We had an unseasonably humid kind of autumn. I know it's winter now. It takes me ages to do these things because I'm very busy. Anyway, so basically just applying it over the roughly over the basic the banks and the river there, and creating a bit of a ford here, so a shallower area in the river, and then adding some rocks as well. But I just wanted to get a basic shape together, a basic surface. I keep saying basic, don't I? But it is a rather basic process. And smoothing it out with my finger, and once I was happy with it, I applied some texture. And this it's unnecessary to do this, but I wanted to see what it was like. I mixed some dark mud, I think this is Russian thick mud from Vallejo, and some dark earth from Vallejo. One's got a very granular finish, one's got a very glossy black finish, and then I, for good measure, to kind of thicken it up and to make it go further really, I added some texture from sculpting paste, I believe, from Winsor & Newton, that's them. And then just very roughly kind of scrubbed it over the surface, not so that it leaves any, glaring white gaps or anything. You can also thin this a bit with water to make it go further. Using a very, very knackered old brush, but one that had a bit of spring in it still, because if it's too stiff then it just won't apply and you'll be left with these big streaks of thick mud. But after that you can see it was a beautiful covering, and it really helps to blend in all the sculpt mould and any remaining polystyrene bits. And I went over the tops of each bank with a bit of dark earth to just add a little bit of lightness. I've no idea why I did that, because it would all be covered in snow anyway. But I tend to do this. I tend to do stuff and then cover it up. But at least I know it's there. Some milliput. You see I'm wearing gloves because this is an epoxy and it's a skin irritant. You don't want to be too exposed to epoxy over the years, really. And then I created, this is the ford area, so I created some stones using these milliput. I could have used extra sculpt mold, but I just couldn't face the mess, quite frankly. And these dry rock hard very quickly, well, within a few hours rather than a few days. And then I'm knocking them into shape, really, or pressing them into shape with a lolly stick or a popsicle stick, depending on where you're from in the world. And this just gives them that kind of more stony look. There you go, technical term, stony look. And now I'm using an old sweet packet just to texture them. It's just scrunched up. You could use foil. I didn't have any foil to hand. I used a sweet packet. And while it was still, the milliput was still malleable, I just went over it with and stippled it with that, and it gave it a really nice stony finish. And then some stone grey, surprisingly enough, from Vallejo. This has got a lovely greeny, blue-grey tint to it. It's darker than the milliput itself, so it's a really nice. Well, it's exactly what it says, a stone finish. Now I'm mixing these two paints. You'll have to rewind to see what they were. I've forgotten what they were. And I'm not stopping now. And this was for the base of the river. So I wanted it to be slightly darker towards the narrower end, and then slightly lighter. So you can see I'm just blending it. I'm not going for a massive, beautiful, wonderful blended, I don't know why I said massive, but paint job here. I just want a rough river bed. When you I've done these enough times to know that you don't have to be neat all at every stage. It's just follow the process, just do it roughly, and then once you've applied textures, once you've applied washes, once you've applied, like this wash I'm applying here, slimy grime, I think, streaking grime maybe, from Vallejo, brilliant kind of diorama paint, really technical paint, and then some slimy grime dark, I think this is, just to spot some lichen on. But once you've added all these details and you can blend, you can, and the resin comes in and it just feathers the edges. You don't have to be neat straight away. Now, this is an unnecessary step really, because you're not going to see it under the resin, but I like doing it because I like to see the progress I've made at each step. It's just a personal thing. Some more of these dots. And I used some to shadow the banks there. And here, I'm blending the banks in now. And again, well, I suppose this step is necessary because I'm not going to be applying snow right down to the water's edge. So you do want a nice smooth transition. And if the resin is translucent, then you will want it to be there to be a nice transition, not a hard edge. I'm adding a bit of green stuff here, mainly because it was just a hand again. There's no reason for not using milliput or anything else. It's just that I get whatever's to hand. And that was because I realised that I needed a bit there to stop up my dam. Otherwise the resin would have poured out the side of the river there. And I cut out some plastic toy packet and applied that, so that leaves a really nice glossy edge to the river. And I just stuck that on with some Mod Podge and then cut another bit. I'm not worried about it being exact height of the river. In the past I've made it the exact height of the river so you don't have to go carving it at the edge, but it depends what you're going to be coating the river in, because it rises up as it cures, so it rises up the plastic dam, if you like it. And I seal that down with a bit of super glue there very neatly, as you can see. Because it rises up, it leaves a little edge which you have to carve back. And if you pour it up to the top of the dam, it doesn't do that. Anyway, I'm mixing equal parts of this epoxy resin, and for this I'm using a silicone cup because I can reuse it. Try and reuse wherever I can rather than use single-use cups all the time. And a few dots of a brown translucent or transparent paint, glass paint in this case, and a few dots of green. Very little goes a very long way, so you have to be careful. You have to know your ratios. I often get this wrong and make it too opaque, but in this case, no, I got it right. I think I mixed a slightly lighter batch later on for use in a different part of the river, because obviously I'd need to have a couple of pours, because I didn't have enough in one cup. But being careful not to go over the top of those nice stones there. There we go. Oh no, there's a darker batch here for the top of the river, and then of course you can kind of mix it in because it's not yet cured. So I added a little bit further down, and then I swirled it into the lighter resin really. And here's the last batch, which was the same as the first. And this is a very satisfying but also very nerve-wracking part of the build, because your dam could leak, you could pour it over where you don't want. Holding a blowtorch here, it's a soldering torch, just on a fairly low heat and not getting it too close to the resin. It's just to pop the bubbles. You don't want to get it too close. If you got it too close, then you'd risk heating up the resin too much, and it would create big bubbles, or it would react badly. So there we go. I was just cutting back the edge there of the dam once this is cured after a good day. And now I'm using UV resin to create ripples. This is I sort of made in one of my recent videos. I trialed this and it worked really well. And I didn't realise, but my UV torch was running out of battery at this time. So later on, I put some new batteries in, and they just dried almost instantly here. But you look, I've got it so close there because I was going, "Why aren't you drying?" But that was because of my torch, and I couldn't tell because of the lights until I put some new ones in, and suddenly it was glaring UV light. I'm creating some splashes here. You can, once you've got a decent UV torch going, this is such an easy technique. You just you just pour on the resin, and then you just kind of manipulate it with a stick while drying it, and keep going, pushing it around into nice ripples. You can create lines like I've got going out from these rocks here, and going around it. So circular ripples, whatever you want really, and splashes. And here I'm just creating like wave forms in it. So I create lines, horizontal lines in it, and then knock them into wave shapes basically while curing, and it works surprisingly well. And of course later on you can go over it, because it's very glossy, and also you get little edges occasionally. You can go over it with your preferred medium. For me that is Mod Podge Gloss. There you can see I've got new batteries in there now, and it just looks so completely different, and it life-changing. Well, not life-changing at all, is it really? But it's look at that lovely purple light there, violet light. So I could go back and do it all properly. Yeah, Mod Podge Gloss, here we go. So now I can go over the Mod Podge Gloss, go over the UV resin with Mod Podge Gloss, and this just takes the glossy edge off it but leaves it still very nice but more realistic looking. And then of course you blow it around with a straw into these really lovely realistic ripples, which looks like, when you've got the UV resin underneath, it looks like the wind kind of blowing ripples over slightly larger waves. So, it's that kind of, it adds an extra layer of, I wouldn't say realism, although it does look very realistic. It's just, it adds a layer of depth, of detail that is missing if you just do Mod Podge or just do the UV resin step. There we go, that's what it looks like once it's all applied. And that's what it looks like once it's all dried. I love those shots. And I went a bit overboard with this. This is a foam and spume from Nock. I've used this in the past on videos, and I got myself another one because I really do like it. But I went a bit overboard with it. Really, it's been a long time since I used it, and I seem to remember it being, you had to apply it thickly, and then it got rather more translucent. So it went on white and then dried semi-clear. I was wrong in this case. I applied it far too thickly, and it just didn't go on as I remembered it. So I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to fix this? As you can see, it actually stayed like this. It didn't look realistic. I was gutted. And I remembered from an old video, I can't remember which one, but I remembered I had to tear off some of the Mod Podge, and I suppose that in a way that was quite useful that I applied it on that, because this is going over the Mod Podge, so it makes it easier to remove rather than straight onto the resin, in which case it wouldn't be. Well, here you go. I was trying to darken it down in areas using washes and all sorts of things, and it wasn't working. And I remembered, and adding a bit more white actually, because I think I'd gone a bit overboard. I was just trying to build up more realistic texture, more realistic colour. It wasn't working. So I went back to that, what I was saying before. I had to scrape some of the Mod Podge off, and here you can see I'm still desperately trying to fix this by applying some water texture here to flatten some of it out, and just seeing what I can do. More wash mixed into that wet stuff, and in the end I thought, so I actually thought that, so I took a sculpting tool and I scraped a load of it off, and this is where I remembered, oh yeah, I did this before, I should remember this, because it really brought the realism. It looked like suddenly it looks so realistic with all these kind of jaggedy bits of water flying about, and really lovely kind of texture that it gave. And like, you know, the water surface tearing up. And I thought, yeah, that's what I wanted. So, complete accident, but it worked. So sometimes this happens, you know, you don't get it right all the time, but you have to know how to fix stuff. So now I'm just using some matting, some grass matting. This stuff I bought in a model shop, and you don't get very much of it, but it's very good quality. I've got static grass applicators coming out my ears, but I find the process of applying static grass so mucky. And also, you know, you get the hairs everywhere, and then you've got to clear up. And as I said, I'm lazy. I'm a lazy maker. I'd much rather just stick bits on. So that's what I've done. Stick it down with Mod Podge. And now it's on to this snow paste. And I've used this before as well, and this is just my favourite snow paste. It was drier than I remembered. So getting it to stick on bits is quite hard, but it's got a lovely kind of sparkly finish to it, and it piles up on stuff so naturally, and it looks lovely. You give it a good mix before you get it out of the pot, basically. I don't know if you can thin it. I didn't bother, but I just kept pressing it on, and I'm pressing it over the grass as well, because, you know, when snow falls, it lands over grass. You get the bits of grass poking through. And you can see here is a lot of my texture work, and a lot of it's completely redundant now because I've just gone over it with this snow texture, making sure to pile some on the rocks, and of course on the ford there. But this is where it really started to come together. For a while I was a bit kind of, oh, have I done the wrong thing? Shouldn't I have kept this natural? But no. Now I'm going over it with some really nice scenic snowflakes from Deluxe Products, and this just kind of blends all the edges together and adds it piles up nicer, you know. And you can also add it like a fine sprinkling. So obviously I had a bit of bare earth in the ford there, so I just applied a bit over there as if it's just kind of blown off the rocks almost, and then fixed it all in place with scenic glue. And I didn't really, I think I applied some wet water over the top first, but I didn't really mind that it started to run a bit, because it adds those kind of lovely drippy snow effects. So I hope you enjoyed that. I had a blast making it, although I got stressed out at times as well. Thank you ever so much for continuing to watch my videos. I'm always blown away by how popular they remain. So thank you, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio!